Hey guys, I know we're starting a little early today. I figured I'd go ahead and get rolling and, I don't know, do some narrations and stuff, maybe do a little writing. Maybe we'll have a longer stream today. I don't know. We'll see how it works out. But, I'm reading the second part of the prophetic pages, so that's what we're doing right now. Hopefully, that should be fun. Check, check, check. Whenever I was without my phone. Check, check. Typically, my. Okay. Spine was cracked. Let's see, where was I? Shorten this down a little bit. Well, welcome, Misbehave. We're just kinda doing a little hangout stream. Usual Thursday kind of thing. Okay, where were we? As I opened the book, I saw that the pages were yellowed and brittle with age, filled with handwritten notes and peculiar symbols that seemed to dance before my eyes. I opened the book and saw that the pages were yellow and fragile due to age. Wait, what? They are a lot of fun. I think we can get rid of that one. I think the author did that one twice. I opened the book. Yeah, we can get rid of that one. That one's a double. It seemed that the person who wrote this book took great care to record something significant. At the moment, I didn't think much of it, but I could sense a strange energy radiating from the book, a kind of chilling pulse that made me shiver. I closed my eyes, brushed off the cover, and read the title, which sent another shiver through me. Prophetic Pages. I considered tossing the book back in the box and simply walking away, but it was too captivating to abandon. I couldn't just leave it there, tucked away in a box in someone's yard. So, with the prophetic pages tucked under my arm, I stood up and approached an older woman who seemed to be managing the yard sale. I extended the book towards her, and she nodded in acknowledgement, before informing me in a raspy voice that the cost was $5. Without a second thought, I handed her the cash. Be cautious with that book, young man. It's not ordinary, the woman warned. I merely nodded and made my way back to my bike, placing the enigmatic book in the basket before setting off towards home. Upon arriving, I parked my bike outside my house, took the prophetic pages, and entered. I went upstairs, not particularly concerned about my family, and shut myself in my room, sitting in my chair, eager to delve deeper into my latest discovery. The intriguing prophetic pages had piqued my interest, and I was ready to immerse myself in its narrative and pages filled with wonder. As I began to flip through, I quickly noticed that each one contained a detailed entry about an individual's life and death, and their names struck me as oddly familiar. I suddenly realized that the names in this book belonged to people I knew. Friends, family, even acquaintances. My hands turned icy when I turned to the next page. I nearly hurled the book across the room. I'd stumbled upon a page that appeared different from the rest. Its ink was darker. The writing seemed more urgent. The names and dates listed alongside each other's entry were accompanied by descriptions. The first entry appeared to belong to my neighbor, Mr. Thompson. Scott Thompson, 63 years old, passed away from a heart attack April 12, 2024. I grimaced, unable to believe what I was reading. It was far too specific to be mere coincidence. Then I suddenly remembered that tonight was the night, and I tossed the book aside, pondering its implications. Was Mr. Thompson truly going to die? Or was this just some cruel joke? Excuse me. In a flash, I understood that I had to warn him about the dangers he was in, so I stood up from my chair, leaving the book behind. As I reached my threshold, I hesitated. Hold on, there's no way he'll believe me. Probably think I'm crazy or pulling a prank or something. My breath was quickening, though. The thought wouldn't leave my mind, so I hurried downstairs into the main area, standing by the front door, lost in thought about Mr. Thompson. "William, what are you up to?" a voice inquired. I turned around quickly to see my parents in the kitchen, both busy preparing dinner, their expressions showing concern for my unusual behavior. "I need to go see Mr. Thompson," I replied. "Why? It's nearly dinner time," Dad responded. A huge lump formed in my throat. What was I supposed to say? That our neighbor was going to have a heart attack and I had discovered it through a book? I need to return something I borrowed to him, and I thought I'd give it back tonight," I said, grinning nervously. "You can do it tomorrow. It's too late now. Pretty sure Mr. Thompson doesn't want to be disturbed at this hour," Mom replied. I growled quietly and clenched my fists. I couldn't voice my frustration because I knew I couldn't argue with my parents about what was supposed to happen. If you're just joining us, we're reading part 2 of the prophetic pages, so stick around. Looks like we've got more to come. A few hours later, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. It was dark in my room, and I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of bed, still in my pajamas, and slipped on my shoes, dashing out of my bedroom, out of the house, heading for Mr. Thomas's place. I raced down the front steps in the dark, but skidded to a halt when I saw the scene before me. Bright ambulance lights illuminated the area, and emergency workers were loading a body into the back of an ambulance. I then noticed that Mr. Thomas's wife sat on the porch crying. I hurried over to her, bent on my hands and knees, breathing heavily. When I looked up, she was staring at me, and despite the darkness, the ambulance lights revealed the tears streaming down her face. "What happened?" I asked. "It's terrible, William. I got up to use the bathroom, but I couldn't open the door. I tried to wake Scott, but he wouldn't wake up, so I called for help. They told me he had a heart attack. I can't believe it. He was the healthiest man I ever knew," Mrs. Thomas explained. I instinctively took a step back, realizing that this was exactly what was foretold in the prophetic pages. It said that Mr. Thomas would die tonight, and it happened just as the book described. "William, are you okay?" Miss Thomas asked me. I took another step back, my heart pounding, then turned and sprinted back home. I burst through the door to find my mom and dad standing there, and they didn't look pleased. "William Johnson, what on earth are you doing up?" Mom yelled at me. I glanced at the front door, recalling what had just occurred, then turned back to my parents. I needed to tell them. I had to let them know. "Mr. Thomas passed away from a heart attack," I explained, gesturing towards the front door. "Oh my God," gasped Dad in disbelief. I wanted to share the details about the book and its contents, but I knew my parents would likely dismiss it as nonsense. Without uttering another word, Mom and Dad hurriedly went past me, dashing out of the house, seemingly on their way to see Mrs. Thomas. I simply returned to my room, surveying the dim space and pondering where I had placed that ridiculous book, contemplating whether to burn it or toss it away. I decided to postpone that until tomorrow, when I had the chance to when I had the chance, and when Mom and Dad weren't around to catch me in the act. I crawled into bed, wondering what would unfold tomorrow. The following morning, I awoke to find the prophetic pages resting on the foot of my bed, which left me puzzled. Without saying a word, I picked it up. As I wrapped... I can't read. As I began to flip through the pages, my heart raced as I recognized the names of friends from high school, family members, even acquaintances like Mr. Thompson. Each page contained a detailed account of a person's death, with dates approaching rapidly. Goosebumps prickled my arm. Was this all just a cruel joke? I attempted to dismiss it as a product of someone's dark imagination, but the more pages I turned, the more dread coiled in my stomach. Eventually, I became consumed by the book, searching for any means to avert the impending deaths, knowing that if I didn't take action, I'd lose everyone I cared about. Excuse me. I attempted to reach out to several people to inform them about what might happen to them, but they either ignored me or claimed to be too busy. Just then, my phone rang, and I glanced down to see it was Ryan, one of my best friends since elementary school. "Hey, Willie, you busy?" he greeted with a cheerful and carefree tone. Not really, but I need to discuss something very important with you," I replied, feeling a knot of panic in my throat. Should I really share the details of the prophetic pages and what occurred to Mr. Thomas? He'd probably just laugh and hang up on me. "Sure, what's going on?" he inquired. I fell silent, hesitating as I struggled to find the right words to explain the book that was essentially about death to my best friend. Just be cautious, all right? I came across something online that made me worry you might be in danger." "Are you referring to that illness happening in Russia?" he chuckled, though I could sense the worry seeping into his voice. Just promise me you'll take it easy, okay? Don't do anything reckless." "Yeah, all right, I promise." And I felt a slight sense of relief, though it was short-lived. I was about to end the call when Ryan mentioned that he had a question for me, and since I was already on the line, I figured I might as well hear him out. "Dude, I'm going to a horror movie showing today and was wondering if you wanted to come along. You probably need a break from whatever's going on in that head of yours." Okay, I guess I'll see you there." After hanging up, I let out a soft sigh and looked down to see the prophetic pages still resting on my lap, now open to a different page. Ryan Orangewood, 26 years old, shot in the forehead and robbed on April 15th, 2024. As soon as I noticed, my phone slipped from my grasp. I shut the book and picked it up, tossing it across the room and watching it land with a loud thud. "Oh my God, no," I thought as I rose from the bed. Without uttering a single word, I gathered everything I needed, leaving the book on the floor, and dashed downstairs to tell Mom and Dad everything that had happened. However, when I reached the lower level, I found it eerily quiet. No one was around. The only thing that caught my eye was a note taped to the front door. I approached it silently, took it down, and read it. "Dear William, I'm sorry, but your father and I had to leave for work early due to an important meeting. We'll be back by lunchtime. If you decide to go out with a friend or by yourself, please call us. Love, Mom." Thank you, Misbehave. Allergies have been acting up today. Big stretch. Okay. Let's see. What else have we got here? Oh yeah, dang. Should probably put it in the subreddit that we're doing live streams here. It's an interesting story. It's from one of our contributors, Master P, who wrote the other one. Two shakes. Alrighty, let's get back to the story here. I didn't care much for the note, crumpling it up before sprinting out of the house. I hopped on my bike and pedaled away as fast as I could. A few minutes later, I arrived at the town square, parked my bike in the rack, and locked it up. I hurried to the movie theater, hoping Ryan wouldn't actually be there. But there he was, leaning against the side of the building, engrossed in his phone. When he noticed me, a smile broke across his face. "There you are. I was just about to call you and ask what on earth happened to you." "I got caught up with something else. Let's just finish this movie so we can head home and wrap up," I replied, raising my hand in a gesture of exasperation. He does indeed. I like his stories. They're always very imaginative. I resolved to share everything with Ryan after the movie, once we left the theater. I hoped he would understand, given his love for horror films, and that he wouldn't think I was insane. A couple of hours later, the movie concluded, and we stood outside the theater. I opened my mouth, ready to explain everything, but he quickly silenced me. "I know you rode your bike here, but let's head to that smoothie shop just a few minutes away. Your bike will be fine, and if it gets stolen, you can hold me responsible," he suggested. Before long, we were strolling down the street in silence, and I let out a soft sigh before clearing my throat. "Ryan, remember how much I enjoy yard sales and how I love buying things from them?" Ryan nodded, as he often did when I had something to share, knowing that my words were usually significant. "At this yard sale, I stumbled across a book filled..." Tried to get ahead of myself. "At this yard sale, I stumbled upon a box filled with books, and one caught my eye called The Prophetic Pages. Initially, I assumed it was just an old dull read, but it turned out it contained a page that predicted when everyone I care about will die. Just a few days ago, my neighbor, Mr. Thomas, passed away from a heart attack, and his name was listed in the book, along with the exact date of his death, as if it had foreseen it." "So, is it like a death book or something?" Ryan asked. "I have no idea what it is. There was even a page for you that stated you'd get shot in the head and robbed today," I replied, my voice tinged with worry. I anticipated Ryan's reaction, hoping he would show concern or suggest that we head home right away. But instead he burst into laughter as if I had just shared a hilarious joke. "Dude, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard from you in all our years of friendship." There it was. I knew it wouldn't take me seriously. He was going to mock me and label me a crazy. I regretted mentioning the book at all. As we walked past an alley, a man appeared. As we walked past an alley, a man who appeared to be older than us suddenly emerged. He wore a white shirt beneath blue overalls and black boots, but What caught my attention was the white mask with black eye holes and the object that was gripped tightly in his hand. It was a gun, and in that instant I realized I had to intervene before things escalated. Ugh, excuse me. Before either Ryan or I could react, the man raised the gun and shot Ryan directly in the forehead. I stood frozen, watching in horror as my friend collapsed lifeless to the ground. Bystanders nearby gasped in shock and screamed at the unfolding scene, but the man discarded the gun and pounced on Ryan like a wild animal, rifling his pockets with frantic urgency. I was astonished that the prophetic pages had claimed yet another life. It appeared to have knowledge of all my friends and acquaintances, predicting what would happen next. Before long, days turned into weeks, and I'd almost forgotten about what had happened to Ryan. However, the prophetic pages remained etched in my mind, and I was determined to protect my family and friends. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a page from my father that I felt an overwhelming urge to scream and tear the book apart. Samuel Johnson, 53, dies in a car crash on April 30th, 2024. I realized that the date was less than a week away. I began I became frantic and desperate to find a way to prevent my dad's death. I needed answers, so I began flipping through the book, hoping the prophetic pages might offer a solution. That's when I discovered a name tucked away in the back of the book. Daniel Roberts, 25 years old, passed away from loneliness on May 15th, 2023. Still alive, owned book before. I was astonished. This guy had owned the prophetic pages before me, yet he was somehow still alive. I knew I had to find him. I took out my phone and began searching online, eventually finding an old news forum where Daniel had shared his experiences with the prophetic pages. I felt compelled to reach out to him, so I sent Daniel an email, pouring out my heart and hoping against all hope that he would respond. To my surprise, Daniel replied. "Hey, Osiris. Glad you could make it, man." He seemed somewhat withdrawn, yet he agreed to meet me at a downtown coffee shop to discuss things. Gathering all the essentials, I made my way to the coffee shop, arriving early to secure a seat. Anxiety washed over me as my stomach twisted into knots. When Daniel entered the coffee shop, I instantly recognized him from the photo he had sent. He appeared older, with graying hair and a weary expression. However, his eyes were sharp, as if he had witnessed too much in his life. "I received your email. You're in trouble, aren't you?" he asked, taking a seat across from me. I nodded, then retrieved the prophetic pages from my bag, sliding it across the table. I found this book at a yard sale and realized it foretold the deaths of my neighbors and friends. Both are gone, and all the names I know are listed in there. Can I prevent this somehow? "Hey, Lou. We're glad you could make it, man." Daniel gazed at me for a long time without uttering a word, his brows knitting together, and then he let out a soft sigh before meeting my gaze. "You can't alter what has been inscribed in the prophetic pages. I've attempted to do so, and it only worsens the situation." The book has its own will. It unveils the truth, but it doesn't permit you to change it. "What should I do then?" I inquired, my voice full of desperation, my hands shaking. "Just accept it. You can't battle fate, but you can treasure the time you have left with them. felt my heart plummet, but something in Daniel's eyes indicated he comprehended my suffering. You must assist them. That's not. You gotta help me. How did you survive the prophetic pages? I implored. I learned to let go. The book is cursed, but it also teaches. Ugh. Learn to let go. The book is cursed, but it also teaches you to value life. You must confront your fears of loss. If you don't, it'll engulf you. His voice remained calm the whole way. His words struck a chord with me, yet they felt like a harsh reality to accept. I couldn't merely sit back and witness my loved ones die. I had to discover a way to fight it. We spent hours deliberating over the book, and with each moment that passed, I felt a spark of hope. Daniel recounted his own battles, the sorrows he had faced, and how he'd learned to accept the losses that he couldn't avert. We talked about finding comfort in the memories of those he had lost, and I began to realize that perhaps I'd been so preoccupied with trying to alter the future that I'd overlooked the present. When I got home that night, I reopened the prophetic pages, my mind buzzing with renewed resolve. I needed to confront the entries, to face the certainty of death with bravery. I picked up my phone, calling each of my friends and family, not to warn them, but to tell them how much they meant to me. I hung up, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I reached out to my mother, my sister, to everyone listed in the book. I expressed my love for them, how much I valued our shared moments together. As the days passed, I felt increasingly lighter, even though the entry still lingered in my mind. The anniversary of my father's passing was drawing near, and I dedicated every possible moment to being with him. We went fishing, exchanging stories, and I made it a point to convey how much he meant to me. On April 30th, I sat next to him in the car as we headed out for lunch. A wave of tranquility washed over me, and upon arriving at the restaurant, I took a deep breath. The prophetic pages no longer held power over me. I'd come to terms with the potential of loss. As I stepped out of the car, a surge of panic hit me when I noticed a truck barreling towards us. But I was ready. I grabbed my dad's arm, pulling him back just in time. The truck veered off course, crashing into a lamppost instead. My heart raced, but I realized I'd finally made a decision. I chose to fight for those I loved, to face the darkness without light. With light. To face the darkness with light. Later that evening, I revisited the book, leafing through the pages one final time. When I reached the last page, I was astonished to see the writing had disappeared. The names and dates vanished before my eyes. The burden of the book felt lighter, and I recognized that I'd altered my destiny. I closed the book, enveloped in a sense of peace. Daniel had been right. I couldn't battle fate, but I could embrace life and the lives of the people I cherished. I had liberated myself from the chains of fear, and I'd learned to value the prophetic essence of life, treasuring every moment of it as if it were my last. As I returned the book to its shelf, I understood I would always remember the lessons it had imparted. Life is unpredictable, yet within that uncertainty lies the beauty of existence. While death may be unavoidable, love will always prevail. And with that revelation, I felt prepared to confront whatever lay ahead of me. Alrighty. Okay, let's see. maybe we'll go ahead and do, yeah. I've got one that I'm planning to do for Halloween called Bitter Candy. And I think maybe we'll go ahead and finish that one. Hang on, let me do some checking here first. Gotta see where we were at with this one here.
Living in the neighborhood for nearly 60 years, we've been a fear trouble now and again to keep them in place. Even though we felt it really was the parents' fault, the kids were such little jerks. Stuck to the strategy, though, of you terrorizing their children. Idiot kids nearly burned my house down with all those damn orange projectiles.
Okay. So, that was part 2. Alright. I tell you what, yeah. If you want the whole thing, you'll have to tune in that week, because I've already got the first 2 parts. But, luckily, the other parts kind of fit together pretty well, so I think it'll be alright. Okay. Anyway, this story is called Bitter Candy, and we're technically picking up in the 3rd part because I've already started narrating it. But this one's called Tricking Mr. Withers, who, to recap, is a mean old man who lives on the road where this kid lives, and he is playing practical jokes on him. Ricky's favorite month of the year was in full swing. He'd been racking his brain for the penultimate trick to top off his final year of trick-or-treating. Mr. Withers was going to get it one more time, and he was going to get it good if Ricky had anything to do with it. He nearly bubbled over with excitement every time an idea came to mind, but nothing seemed right just yet. He was going to hit Mr. Get-Away-From-My-Lawn's house so hard the neighborhood would still be talking about it when he went off to college. It didn't even matter if Rick... Where was it? It didn't even matter to Ricky if his parents grounded him until then. He was dead set on it, and nothing was going to stop him. He was small for his age, but his ability to outwit 6th graders, some adults as well, had come up with creative pranks put him at the top of the food chain in his 5th grade class. Kids listened to him, and you could even say they feared him. His teacher, Mrs. Viskel, often remarked to her colleagues, "I see a bright future in politics for that one." Less than 3 months into the school year, and he had already brought her to tears twice. She was strongly considering retirement next year. Hey, Cindy. Glad you could make it. We're doing a little bit of a live reading this time. Gonna finish up some guest stories for the Halloween months. Last October, the grumpy old man had gotten a reprieve because Paul Clark had forgotten to extinguish the candle in his jack-o'-lantern the year before. Ricky shamed Paul at school the next day for screwing up his trick and sent him to eat lunch alone for the rest of the week. The next year, he reminded Paul of his screw-up and made him sit elsewhere for the entire month of October. One day, while Ricky was pulling rusty nails out of an old 2x4 to hammer into one of Mr. Withers' car tires. The perfect trick just popped into his head. Actually, it was two tricks. While he enacted the prank at hand, he thought through the details of his ultimate Halloween trick. It involved a maneuver he'd learned about in history class called a feint. Halloween was fast approaching, and he needed everyone on board if his plan was going to work. So he forgave Paul for his past mistake. The kid had been punished enough, and Ricky figured getting him out of the doghouse would make him more amenable to a special task that he had for him. There was no way Ricky was going to let Old Man Withers off the hook this year. No way in hell. Gerald would have bought a DIY surveillance system years ago if he'd known they'd become so inexpensive. It paid for itself just 2 days after he installed it. The footage of Ricky sneaking into his house through the back door while he sat on the front porch set him to boiling. He could barely keep from rushing down the street to confront the kid with the proof of his crime, and he held himself in check as he scrutinized every second of the eye-opening video. Gerald watched the footage of the kid slinking through the kitchen, poking pinholes in various packages of food. He now knew why his bread always got stale so quickly, and why freezer burn was so prevalent amongst his steaks and burger patties. Witnessing the kid shake what appeared to be an empty jar over his basket of fruit and vegetables suddenly solved the fruit fly mystery he'd been scratching his head over for so long. The old man paced back and forth in front of the monitor, growing angrier and angrier as every little inconvenience of his life was proven to be the work of a mischievous brat that was just entering the beginning stages of puberty. He decided to wait until he caught him on camera enacting his plan. He figured the kid would strike on Halloween. Then he'd take the damning evidence over to the police station the next morning and put an end to the delinquent's tricks once and for all. He rushed out of his house to buy more cameras so he could cover every room. Ricky had gotten sloppy a couple of weeks back, leaving a handprint on the back door window that Gerald noticed was too small to be his own. And that's how easily he lost the upper hand. Disney princesses, pirates, zombies, vampires, goblins, space aliens, and all sorts of other colorful attired characters dance through the neighborhood. Ricky was the exception in his no-frills ghost costume. He had cut a slit in the back so he could easily slip the top down to show everyone that he was also on the hunt for candy. Once he had made his presence known and gathered enough candy to complete his alibi, he quietly slipped into the woods to meet with Paul. Just as Ricky had predicted, Paul was willing to skip the first hour or so of candy gathering if it redeemed him in the eyes of his friends. Being shunned last October had seriously injured his self-esteem to the point that he would have done just about anything to get back in the good graces of his group of friends. He didn't go trick-or-treating last year because no one wanted him around. So, he wouldn't be missing this year. He quickly donned Ricky's white sheet, repeated his instructions, and rushed off to trick-or-treat with his friends instead. Ricky, dressed all in black, rushed off to scope out the old man's house and wait for the signal. It had taken a lot of painstaking effort to find the 5 well-hidden beauties that were going to do most of the work this year. Their globular black and red abdomens reflected in Ricky's eyes as he inspected them, one by one, in their glass prisons. He made sure the lid was tightly closed, and then slipped the jar back into his backpack. He quietly came up from the backyard, snuck along the side of the house, and peeked around the corner. The old man was sitting on his porch, in the dark like a trapdoor spider, waiting for some unsuspecting prey to come near his entrance. The tip of his cigar came to life for one fiery second, illuminating the permanent scowl on his face, and then faded. He exhaled a cloud of smoke as he stared out at all the children going door to door, while their parents followed along on the sidewalk at their own pace. A flicker of movement in the corner of the old man's eye brought a wicked smile to his face as Ricky slipped out of sight and headed towards the back door. He tightly clenched his cane in both hands and considered going inside to catch him in the act. He decided to stick to his plan, though. As far as he was concerned, the movie he was making exposed the whole neighborhood and made a great argument for doing away with all the New Age idiocracies in favor of more traditional styles of living. He figured it was worth missing out on cracking a kid's head open with the metal tip of his walking stick. Oh, goodness, there's 2 Lou's now. It actually pleased the old man to have just one target to focus on. Hey, Marty, we're glad to see you, man. He could strike at everyone and everything he despised with a short trip to the police station. He was convinced that the kid was responsible for every little aggravation he'd endured the last few years. Actually, his feeble, bitter, and irrational old mind blamed Ricky for every bad thing that had ever happened to him. That really wasn't anything new, though. Mr. Kramer's view was that children had been at their very... Try that one again. Oh, that would be a good tutorial. That children had been there at every point in his life to frustrate, antagonize, and shame him. He now had what he hoped was a way to quell all the unquiet ghosts in his head. A loud crack sounded off the side of his house. Gerald posted off his cane and rose to his feet as an egg exploded against the porch railing and scattered bits of yolk and shell over his pants. The old man reached down deep into himself and pulled forth a strength, none of the hoodlums expected. He rushed to the steps, shouting every nasty epithet he knew, and bounded down them much quicker than anyone expected, effectively clipping their assault and sending kids fleeing in every direction. Ricky had told them that they'd have nearly a minute for their strike from the sidewalk, because it took a little over 2 minutes for the feeble old man to get to and from his mailbox. He hadn't taken into account what an adrenaline-fueled rage could accomplish, even in such a feeble old man. The kid that was supposed to climb the side rail of the porch and knock on the front door chickened out and ran. Ricky's assault plan was floundering. He was so sure it would go off without a hitch that he hadn't accounted for a shorter account of time to accomplish his secret task inside. Mr. Withers looked 10 times more frightening than Tammy Swanson had ever seen him look before. The enraged Mr. Withers was on her before she could do more than turn and run. His cane took her behind the knee and then quickly cracked across her ass as she toppled to her knees. He raised the cane up as high as he could to bring it down on her backside again, but his left leg buckled beneath him. He managed to stay upright, but the chubby preteen had crawled to the sidewalk and gotten to her feet by the time he'd steadied himself. She crouched there, tangled in her mummy bandages, looking as pathetic as a cow caught in a barbed wire fence. Wiping tears from her eyes, she looked at the tip of his cane as he brought it down on one of her bandages that lay at his feet. He relinquished the bit of her costume just as she grabbed it and yanked as hard as she could. He went head over heels backwards and toppled onto the lawn. The tree lawn? I don't know what a tree lawn is. Mr. Withers covered the distance between them and came to a stop before her, just as she rose to her hands and knees. She began to bawl with her eyes. Blech. I can't talk today. She began to bawl her eyes out at his shadow. She began to bawl her eyes out as his shadow completely engulfed her shivering form. Later, she would convince herself it was just her imagination messing with her head, but at that moment, his shadow cast over her seemed darker than her room at bedtime. She had given up all pretense of getting away. The old man snorted like a pig and delivered a line she would repeat to her shrink years later. "Back to your wallow, little pig." He continued to snort and squeal as he turned and hobbled back to his porch, leaning heavily on his cane. All the rage-fueled strength had drained out of him, and he was just an old man again. By the time he flopped heavily into his chair, Tammy was nowhere to be seen, and the street was empty. He laughed aloud at the realization that it was him that had sent kids and adults alike scurrying off to some quieter part of the neighborhood. Only Mr. Withers could openly beat a child and get off without further altercation. He rested his head against the back of his chair and muttered it was good to be the king. I've never heard that before. Welcome, Peg. Oh, that's a new one on me. But it's interesting. He lit a cigar and gave it a few puffs to get it burning brightly. Just then, a scream, followed by the sound of shattering glass, came from inside the house. All right, let me set up the next one. Then, the treat. Oh yeah, this one should definitely work. Ricky slipped out of his hiding place and headed for the back door as soon as he heard the first egg burst against the house. He was inside a few seconds later, slowly creeping towards the hallway that led to the bedroom. He had wondered before why the old man slept in the smaller of the two rooms, but right now all he had in his mind was the task at hand. He silently crept forward, guided only by the moonlight that shined from Mr. Wither's bedroom at the far side of the house. He stopped at the hall entrance and listened to the commotion outside, but the only noise he could hear confused him. Squealing, he muttered to himself. The hallway seemed much longer and narrower in the dark. The boy gulped involuntarily, clutched tightly at the shoulder straps of his backpack, and then slipped further into the darkness of the musty old house. Hang on a sec, guys. Let me readjust it. We don't have any static. Check, 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 check. Cool. The silvery light at the end of the hall beckoned him forward. He began to worry the assault on the front yard hadn't gone as planned, so he took a deep breath and quickened his pace. Yeah, me too. Usually she comes in for these things. He reached the bedroom and rushed in. Hey, NATO, we're glad you could make it, man. Plug your sneakers. No, I have no idea. I didn't know sneakers needed power. He reached the bedroom and rushed in, banging his knee on the dresser along the way. Pain shot through him and stilled the panic rising in him. He took another deep breath and then tiptoed to the bed. He pulled back the blanket, swung his backpack onto the floor, and pulled out a glass container. Shaking everything to the bottom of the jar, he unscrewed the lid and carefully dumped the contents onto the bed. 4 shiny black specks, the size of tic-tacs, crawled across the moonlight-covered bedsheets. Ricky did a double take, stared into the empty jar, and then let out a little yelp. He snapped the tiny biter away, dropping the jar in his panic and clutching his arm. It was only his mind at this point, but he swore he could feel his arm throbbing and swelling. Unbeknownst to the poisoned boy, the spider was on his finger, clinging tightly, as her kind are wont to do. She sank her venomous fangs into his flesh again. His eyes cracked as he screamed out even louder than before. Ricky felt 3 more pinprick sensations on his hands and wrists as he danced spasmodically around the room before the spider dropped to the floor and disappeared beneath the dresser. The frightened boy instantly understood the parable he'd heard all his life that warned against seeking revenge. The fear of the poison rushing through his bloodstream was instantly replaced by a dread he was reluctant to admit he'd felt every day of his life, since he'd first climbed Mr. Withers' fence all those years ago. There we go. Whew. Give me a second. Let me check on something real quick. Okay. Yeah, just checking on something here. He slowly turned to the doorway, and there stood his greatest enemy. Ricky burst into tears and began to blubber incoherently at the tired old man. He professed between sobs that he was sorry for everything that he'd ever done to him, and promised to make it up to him if only he'd drive him to the hospital. Mr. Withers just leveled his cane at Ricky's chest and poked him hard. The boy stumbled backwards a few feet and was met with another poke that pushed him back further. Suddenly, he no longer had the moon to see by. Then the closet door slammed into him, and he fell to the floor. He leapt to his feet and began to bang on the door, when instead he should have reached the doorknob. That realization came too late to do him any good, though, as Mr. Withers slid a chair against the door and snugged it under the outer knob. I think he's on the front porch, Osiris. Sometimes he likes to go sit in the sunlight. Yeah. Gotta help with that enunciation there. Instantly, he reached up and tugged on the string dangling from the ceiling. The light fixture clicked, but brought no light. He frantically tugged on it a few more times with the same lack of results. He dropped down and pressed his face to the floor, but the door was too low to see under. Mr. Withers saw his blankets were pulled back on his bed. That observation combined with the broken glass scattered all over the floor gave him an inkling of what he figured the boy was doing in his room. "You're quite the mischievous entomologist, aren't you? Slugs in my bed, or..." He instantly recoiled. Recalled the flea infestation he'd had a couple of years ago. "Why, you little..." Ricky heard a loud crack followed by shattering glass. "Oh, look what you made me do now. My wife's love..." "My wife loved that mirror. I guess they can add vandalism to the charges. That's it. I'm calling the police." The boy heard more glass crunching underfoot. Suddenly, the old man's voice seemed strained and weaker than before. "Oy vey, it's Mur. Now. Not now, Adina. Please, not yet. I'm not yet ready to. A loud crash cut off any further words he might have spoken. The old hardwood floor shook slightly underneath Ricky, in concert with the loud noise. He pressed his ear to the door and listened for any hints as to what was going on in the room. What he could only interpret as an incoherent whisper paired with erratic thumping raised goosebumps on his arm. A sudden loud gasp, like someone breaking the surface after being underwater for nearly too long, shattered the strange reverberating hisses and foreign-sounding curses resonating through the room. Ricky slammed his head against the door frame and then retreated deeper into the closet. He sat there for several seconds on the edge of hysteria. Enveloped in darkness and paralyzed with a dread he had never felt in his life. Then a low, choppy groan broke through the silence. The eerie and hope-disabling chant continued for several minutes, until the frightened boy broke down and began to sob. The disheartening tone of his weeping, mingled with the weak, inhuman wails, caused him to retreat deeper into his mind as well. His imagination sought out the stories he'd heard in the neighborhood about Mr. Withers' wife. Some kids said she'd killed herself to escape her husband's limitless cruelty. Others said she refused to be tamed by her overbearing husband, so he chained her up in the attic or the basement, depending on who told the story, where she slowly went insane. Ricky knew the house didn't have an attic or a basement, but it suddenly made sense to him why the other bedroom was always locked when he visited. His knack for sussing out the shape and size of areas without seeing them in their entirety told him the room right across the hall was bigger than where Mr. Withers slept. The idea of a man cruel enough to lock away his wife for decades, but sleep in a room about half the size of her prison, didn't make much sense to him. His attempts to interpret the ghostly moaning left him puzzled and fearing the worst. Was there something more dangerous than Mr. Withers in the house? What was going on out there, and why wasn't the old man beating him through the door? Berating him. If you're just joining us, we're on the last part of Bitter Candy, which is going to be one of our guest Halloween stories this year. And why wasn't the old man berating him through the door? Surely a call to the police shouldn't take so long. The old grump didn't seem like the type to miss out on gloating after his victory. Just when Ricky was ready to scream and claw at his injured arm, the insistent noises dropped away, and the entire house fell deadly silent. Eventually, the silence became too much for the frightened boy. He began to drum his fingers on the floor in an effort to stave off the panic rising up inside him. After a while, Ricky became aware of his tapping on the floor and attributed it to the banshee across the hall. In his heightened state of hysteria, he had convinced himself that it wasn't Mr. Withers, but some creature far worse than he that he needed to escape from. Yep. Goodness. He began to stroke the floor with his injured hand while continuing to tap with his other. His fingernails dug into the old wood, driving splinters into his flesh, but he didn't seem to feel it. He was certain that Mr. Wither's wife was slowly crawling her way out of her prison, and soon she would be at the closet door. The very door that trapped him there was soon to be his only protection from the insane creature that he knew hated him and everything in the world more than the evil old man was capable of. Once she was free of her prison, she would only need to knock aside the chair keeping him trapped, and she would have him in her clutches. Eventually, the banshee quit her incessant scratching. Was she free? Was she coming for him now? Ricky raised himself to his feet and waited for the door to swing open. Maybe he could dash past her and escape. He waited, poised to shove past her and run for his life, but she didn't come for him. Tired and feeling weaker than he'd ever felt before, he slid down onto his side and curled into the fetal position. Time passed, yet Ricky heard nothing. Not the old man, not police sirens, not the wicked thing from across the hall. He laid there on the floor and tried to ignore the awful throbbing pain in his hand and arm. He couldn't judge how long he had been trapped, but the concept of time was not lost to him. His shoulders and back were cramping up fiercely. He could hear his heart beating madly in his ears, like when he used to see how long he could hold his breath underwater. His eyes slowly slipped closed as he fell asleep. Yes, please. I'll take any likes I can get here. Well, we're reading the last part of Bitter Candy, if you're just joining us, so be sure that you stay tuned. He woke up later to a horrible pain in his abdomen. He felt like the closet was spinning, and the strong smell of cold vomit and piss crippled his sense of smell. Having lost all concern for what lurked on the other side of the door, he weakly pulled himself to a sitting position and banged on it. "Hello? Is there anybody out there? Is there anybody at home? Hello?" He yelled and banged on the door until both his throat and his hands were sore. Eventually, weakened by his violent efforts, he laid down and slipped into a coma-like sleep. While the spider venom coursed through every inch of his little boy body, he dreamed of a shadowy veil shrouded in a dense fog. He stood there, staring across the wide distance at a young woman standing by a tall apple tree in full bloom. She turned in his direction and then began to move away from the tree at an impossible speed. As she drew closer to Ricky, her billowing white dress grew ragged, smudged with dirt, and hung strangely on her rapidly withering body. Blossoms withered and fell off as the apple tree grew more and more bent and ugly, the closer she got to the dreaming boy. Finally, she came to within a few feet of him and stopped abruptly. She seemed... She seemed to float there before him in a decayed, yellowed rag, her legs below the knees shrouded in a thick, crawling mist. She gazed at him with a sad, resolute look on her beautiful face, untouched by time. Her bony shoulders and hips showed through the tissue-thin fabric draped loosely on her shivering, pale form. Her skin was dry, cracked, and yellowed like her wedding dress. She didn't even flinch when the ghostly bride he didn't even flinch. He didn't even flinch when the ghostly bride glided effortlessly up to him and took his hand in both of hers. She looked deeply into his eyes, and with a voice like his mother's, she whispered, "You have to say, 'Trick or treat,' or else they won't give you any candy. Now knock firmly, and don't hesitate when the door opens." Ricky burst from his dream and pulled himself up to his knees. He began to slam his forearm against the door with every bit of force he could muster. He slowly raised up off the ground as he pounded at the door until he felt something give way. He heard something clatter to the ground as the door creaked open a few inches and came to rest against some object lying inches away from it. He shoved the door open, knocking the chair to the side, stumbling to his knees, and came face to face with Mr. Withers. The wicked old man laid stiffly. Can't talk today. Sorry, guys. The wicked old man lay stiffly in the doorway, leading to the hall with his arms stretched out to either side of his motionless body. His wide open eyes stared right at Ricky. The boy struggled to his feet and managed to stagger diagonally, grabbing hold of the dresser to steady himself. Mr. Withers' fear-stricken face looked him then. Ugh. Mr. Withers' fear-stricken face looked past him then, gazing into the darkness of the closet. Ricky rubbed his light-sensitive eyes. The sun shone through the windows and doused the entire room in its glorious rays. Ricky pushed off the dresser and staggered to the window. He didn't have it in himself to step past Mr. Withers. He flipped the latches on the window, but little did he know the old man had painted the window shut many years ago. He pulled and yanked at it to no avail. Sapped of every bit of strength he had left, he sat down on the bed and rolled onto his back. Ricky's left foot hung down and slightly rocked back and forth amongst a hastily constructed spider web under the bed. He didn't even notice when the disturbed spider bit him on his ankle as he fell asleep once again. Between the end of the mattress and the headboard rested the beginning of another tangled web. And there we go. That is Bitter Candy by Kolpic. A pretty good Halloween story, quite honestly. One of the better ones, I think. It's definitely a good one. I just kind of stumbled across it, but it's definitely a good one. Do a little editing here. Hang on a second. There we go. It's one of the things I always teach in the tutorials is you got to get a little bit of silence in order to get rid of all the noise profile stuff. Excuse me. think here in a minute we might be on to the writing. See what we got going on there. I know I've got at least a few more Halloween stories I got to finish. And I mean, there's always commissions and things that I've got. It's not a bad place to be, inundated with commissions. Why I'm so yawny. I slept like a dead brick last night. That's what I was thinking of. I expected it to be Mr. Werther's, but I guess not. Anybody got any fun fall activities they're getting up to this weekend? I don't know what we've got planned this weekend. Hopefully it's rest. Your boy is definitely feeling these allergies this month. Something about changing seasons, I don't know, but it always kind of flares up my allergies real bad. There we go. I say, did we not come back? I need to start mushroom growing, Lou. I definitely have a good setup for it. There's a big market around here for organically grown mushrooms. And noise reduction. There we go. Nice. Solid mushroom stock there. I thought it was longer than that. Huh. Weird. Anybody planning on doing something for the Halloween contest there? If you haven't started writing yet, you've got some time. I mean, entries don't end till the 15th. I'd love to have some of you guys write me some stories for the channel there. Alrighty, all those are done. Well, I think that's about all we've got for the morning here. Um, I'm going to let you guys go, I reckon, and we'll hang out more on Saturday. Don't forget, we've got live reads on Saturday, so don't be late. I'm going to go get some breakfast, I think. Maybe another cup of coffee. You guys have a great day. We'll catch you on the next one. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful morning.